Welcome to Quantum Synchronicity, where we are working together to bring this new type of view to our new paradigm. Today, I'm with the amazing Eben Larson, quantum psychologist, and Dr. Somer Nicole, who is just fabulous and has a new program that we are very excited to talk about.
My background is in my doctorate's in physical therapy. And just to give you, those of you listening, a little context for just who you're listening to, I've been in the healing and therapy world for about 20 plus years. And whenever I went to PT school to get to the root of people's pain. And when I realized there was this massive psychosomatic and nervous system component missing from my Western science education, I spent about 15, 17 years sort of filling in the gaps of what I thought PT school left out, which really led me to really three things. This is somatic therapy, reparenting work, and nervous system regulation. And now I know those three things have to be incorporated, into someone's healing journey to really move the needle, to really see sustainable change in the body. So all of my work went online about 4 years ago, like everyone else with COVID. And I created a 6-month program for personal healing. And then I started to, came fairly quickly. It was within like 2 days, I wrote this 150-page manual for my method, which is called the somatic reparenting method. And I created this 9-month facilitator training for therapists, coaches, and healers, basically to learn the somatic reparenting method, which is a combination of subconscious mind reprogramming. It's really deep emotional healing using the wisdom of the body. But I sort of feel like it's my little baby to get out into the world. I don't have kids in this lifetime, so all of my creative energy just goes into this. And I feel like I have this modality that I've created from personal experience and clinical experience that really works for people. And so I kind of feel like it's mine to keep watering and mine to get out into the world. And it's a really, really big joy for me to be surrounded by like-minded practitioners that have big hearts of service, and they're just really out to help people heal. And for me, it's really fun to be in the room, with those types of people.
That is just beautiful. I have listened to a lot of your talks and lives already, and I just love the fact that you are bridging all of these different modalities and really working on the embodiment, which I think is really, really important right now more than anything else. And one of the things that I noted specifically was your word that you used a lot in regards to the movements, which was erotic movements. I would love for you to talk a little bit about that, and then I'd love to add a little bit to that from the quantum psychology perspective, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. So about 3 years ago, this woman friend of mine moved to the island, and she started teaching a feminine embodiment practice called S Factor. It actually started in LA by Sheila Kelly. And I've been lucky enough to be kind of in this small group of women going to these classes weekly for about 3 years, going on 4 years now. And I'm now teaching this method called S Factor. And so I could say it's also I don't even need to use the word erotic for it. I could just say slow, sensual movement. Pleasure-led movement, body-led movement. To me, it's the best somatic therapy that I've found, because it's basically helping people connect to their internal emotional experience and learn how to express that outwardly, somatically through the body. And in that, making us congruent, right? And I use that word a lot, congruent. You'll see people that are highly traumatized, they're very incongruent, right? Their energy doesn't quite match their words. Their actions don't really match their words. And there's this incongruency. And so for trauma healing, it's very important for us to learn, what are we feeling and how do I express that through my body? And S Factor specifically is that the word pleasure is used a lot. And there's different, if you get deeper into that particular practice, there's It's so fun. The emotional psychology of S Factor is super fun. There's 10 erotic creatures that live inside of us, and they all are connected to an emotion. So it gives us these archetypes to work with to really know ourselves, which is really just super fun and playful and deep. But yeah, the word, what I've noticed, what I've noticed recently, and as I just travel and I teach both somatic reparenting and S Factor, which is this slow sensual movement that really connects us to our innate eroticism, it connects us to our own pleasure. What I've noticed is that many people have a trigger around the word pleasure and even around the word erotic. They immediately think sex. And then whatever their programming and their beliefs around sex, there's a lot of shame and guilt depending on their religion, they were grown up and around that, comes out through that. And then it shows up in their movement. It's very fascinating. There's a rigidity and a tension that happens whenever there's a belief that our own erotic nature, our own erotic energy is wrong or is bad, or I shouldn't show that energy. And so this is probably the most juicy thing you could ask me to talk about, because I feel like I have so much passion behind it, because I see the deep trigger that it has for most people. And I also am on this other end of it where I see the deep embodiment and empowerment that comes from learning to move the body in these non-linear ways, right? If we think of most of us that have been, yoga is very alignment based, very linear, if you think Warrior 2 and this type of stuff, very linear movement. And what I noticed when I was going through my personal healing journey, and I came from a very chronic freeze response in the body. There was a lot of rigidity in my body, a lot of tension in my body from being in that chronic freeze state. And I was doing the reparenting work and I was doing the nervous system work. And then I found S Factor. And what I noticed going through S Factor is healing from a traumatic divorce. And so the physical rigidity that was held in my body from that chronic freeze response absolutely needed nonlinear movement, which looks like waves and circles and spirals in the body, right? And so it's this way of trying to bring people this new way of literally moving the body so that it is the opposite of linear, so that the body can start to unlock these areas of tension and stagnation. And what inevitably happens is as you move, let's say repressed emotion, as you begin to process what's gone unprocessed and you begin to express what's gone unexpressed, right? Really actually clearing the energy of trauma in the body. What inevitably happens is that our life force energy is freed up.
Yes.
So you call it Shakti, Kundalini, Chi, Prana, whatever you want to call it, that energy is freed up in the body. And we actually need to learn how to run that energy. And that energy is inherently erotic. And that doesn't have to mean, it's interesting when I even use the word erotic, because it's whatever that means to you or whoever is listening, you'll have a certain, you'll either be immediately turned off by it or you'll be kind of intrigued by it, right? And so I'm often hesitant to even use the word erotic for a brand new audience, because I really see S Factor specifically in the way that I bring that into my somatic practice. I really see it as the best somatic therapy that I've found, because what it's doing is helping women connect to their emotional internal experience, stay in the body, only move the body when the body wants to move, and when it feels pleasurable, when it feels good. So I could even replace the word of pleasure by pleasant. If the word pleasure is triggering, to anyone that's listening, you can even replace it by that. So I'm just extra attuned to that right now, because I was teaching it out and about when I was traveling on the mainland, and really noticing that trigger for people. And to me, it almost it actually makes me lean into the practice more. It actually makes me want to share it more, because I know if it's bringing resistance for people, there's an opportunity for healing there, right?
Absolutely. I actually love the fact that you're using that word. In the Greek language, there's 16 or 17, I think, words for love, and one of them is eros, which is the basis of erotic. So it's a frequency of love, indeed, when it is embodied as such. And what I see in my practice a lot is an incredible distortion regarding sexuality.
Yes.
And people often call their sexuality intimacy, but I think that it's the intimacy part that's missing the most. There is a lack of intimacy. There's a fear of touch, even. There is a fear of affection. There is a whole, especially here in the States, I have to say, a big kind of taboo around even caring touch, for the fear of it might, trespass a boundary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In Europe, I think we grew up a little bit more free in that way. I hope it's still the case. But I remember when I was a little girl and I was afraid in school, well, then my teachers would put me on their laps and they would kiss my little cheeks to make me feel better. That is something that would not fly very well these days in the schools here for sure. And what I see in my clientele is indeed a complete disconnect with their own erotic energetics, again, because it's so distorted, both men and women. And when it comes to the women, as you also pointed a little bit to, is in their upbringing, they are learning that even if their body is a no, they still have to say yes once in a while to please their partner, their man typically. And in a very blunt manner, what I always share with my clients is that if you have to use lube, you might ask the question as to why are you allowing yourself to go there, unless of course you have a medical condition, because there is this it can be a self-violating act actually to force yourself to open up that way. So I'm really loving the fact that you are helping all of these individuals, especially women, to connect in a more sacred manner, and to their own eroticism and their own pleasure.
What's happening right now in this new paradigm and this quantum view is that we're redefining everything. And what I really like is how you are boldly redefining this in a way that it resonates with me. I imagine that it resonates a lot with women, because women seem to get that a lot more, that eroticism is a divine creation within the flames of your heart and soul, where men kind of have been trained due to the patriarchal notions that dominate, destroy, rape, pillage, do whatever it takes. So how are men reacting to this new view that you're stirring up in such a very more articulate and scientific way?
I love this question, because I actually have more and more men each year join my group programs, and they used to be all women, and then I was very specific about men are welcome too. And I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna bring this as a somatic practice, and yes, it's S factor style movement, and I'll even bring in like some of the archetypes of the erotic creatures, and I share it with the men and say, all of us have a masculine and feminine inside of us. This specifically is a feminine embodiment practice, but you have a feminine energy inside of you. And when I go in to explain some of these archetypes, right, like the dangerous challenger, for example, her emotion is anger. She's the one that will provoke. She's the one that likes confrontation. She's the one that, will say no. She's the one that holds boundaries, right? Men are like, oh yeah, I know that part of myself. Yeah, I totally get it. And they really get it. And then when I show them give them the technical cues of that nonlinear movement, there's like, wow, I've never moved my body that way. And I can feel where I'm so tight, right? Around my rib cage or around my pelvis. And they really like it. They're just like, it makes total sense to them. And so it's beautiful. I've also seen Sheila Kelly, who's the creator of S Factor, teach more and more workshops for men and women as well. So I feel like it's, I guess, the way I present it and the way I see it, because I see everything through the lens of the nervous system, is a somatic therapy. It just like, all kinds of other different, breath and movement modalities are somatic therapy. It's a way to become congruent within ourselves. It's a way to orient to pleasure in the body, anything that feels good in the body. Because when we've been so dysregulated and traumatized, we are oriented to negativity and worst case scenario. And so to orient, nobody can, I tell my clients this all the time, like no one can do this work for you, the work of many, many times a day, consciously orienting yourself to things that bring you pleasure, things that bring you joy, genuine gratitude, things that you find beautiful, stopping to smell a rose, stopping to watch the sunset, surrounding yourself with people that elicit safety and connection. Those little, what they're called glimmers, right, of ventral vagal imprints or regulated imprints in the body. We can give ourselves lots and lots of those throughout the day. And no one else can do that piece for us, right? And so this practice is a way, I feel like, to really understand like the parts of ourselves that have gone unexpressed, that need to be expressed. And then with whatever I'm feeling, whether it's fear or shyness or anger or whatever it is I'm feeling, love, how can I orient to something in my body that feels good at the same time I'm running that anger through my body or running that fear through my body? And to me, someone that's exhausted myself trying to like process the anger of my lineage, it was gold to me to learn in S Factor. My teacher said, you know how anger can kind of like spin us up and out, right? So what if instead, to stay in your body, you put that anger into a burn, into your muscles, into muscle exertion. So coming into a low squat, coming into a low push-up, and just actually letting it burn. And I see that from the nervous system perspective, all it's doing is helping us discharge that sympathetic energy of that fight or flight response. And so I was like, muscle exertion's always been pleasurable to me. Like I've always loved exercise. So, okay, let me try this. Let me run anger through my body, but also do something in my body that feels good, move in a way that feels good. And to me, it was just like, this is gold. I will share this as long as I live, because I'm somebody that just exhausts myself trying to process anger.
I love the aspect of the and instead of the or, because that also is very new paradigm, right, David? We've talked about this quite a bit, that you don't have to be polarized by specifically here emotions, right? You can actually, in the embodiment that you just shared, the way that you just shared it, is such a beautiful example of how we can start really going towards the and the unification in that regard, individually and collectively, of course.
I think it's very Buddhist, very tantric, dispelling duality in being in as the observer, and that forces you to be present. And by being present in the moment, then you can actually have that synchronistic experience with the universe and be free of any constructs or mental aberrations that are keeping you away from your healing process.
Yeah, and I just want to add one thing to this, which is like, I get this question a lot, like, how do we know we're healing? Like, how do we know like the nervous system is getting better, And one of the answers to that is watching how well am I responding to things? Like, is my level of responsiveness getting better, right? Like in my relationships, in conflict, in ruptures, in repair conversations, is my level of responsiveness getting better? And that's just with other people. But if we look at that toward ourselves, it's like when some sort of emotional intensity is running through me, right? How can I respond to that instead of freezing? Let's speak to my default, which used to be freeze. Instead of freezing or projecting that onto somebody else, like how can I be with myself? So much of the nervous system work is about how can I stay? How can I stay with myself in this intensity? How can I stay in my body and feel this and breathe at the same time and maybe orient myself to pleasure? So I just want that word is, I feel like it's so important for understanding like what is a healthy nervous system. It's one that can respond, and it's one that is flexible. It can go in and out of these states of dysregulation, because the dysregulation itself is not bad or wrong. Like, it is normal for us to go in and out of these states. It's really only a problem when we get stuck in those states of dysregulation.
It's really responding versus reacting, right? Versus this knee jerk, which would be the sympathetic nervous system's way of handling things, right? It is allowing that response to actually flow a little bit better, and going from what I call a trigger to an activation,
Mhm.
Mm.
right? Because in the activation, it can be life-giving, right? Even when we are sitting with these what we label as negative emotions or negative thoughts. If we can indeed embrace them, just like you said, and respond to them with an acceptance or an embodiment, yet again, I think we're gonna really shift our collective nervous system that way as well.
Is any of this measurable? I mean, oxytocin, or endorphins, and this ability to be in Buddhism, they call it bodhicitta, or just in a state of happiness. Because from what I'm hearing from you, it's like the real goal is being in that state of happiness to where that you're not swayed by the nonsense of the illusion of emotions, but you can articulate those emotions in a very loving way.
Mm.
Yeah, I wouldn't use the word it means I'm happy all the time. It means I'm responsive to what's happening, because
Uh,
I feel like what people do is they make themselves wrong for their emotion. And I'll just
Yeah.
use anger because that's such an easy one to use. And if they make themselves wrong for the anger itself, right, then what it's doing is probably abandoning or ignoring in some way the angry teenager inside of them that actually like needs to be heard or like is trying to get their attention for some way, shape, or form. So that can go for any emotion. If we feel fear, if we feel abandoned, if we feel shy and like we want to hide, and in particular if we feel young, like in our grief or in our anger, that's when it's our cue of like, oh, that's my inner child. There's some younger part of myself that is emotionally frozen in time that needs my attention, and that needs me to hear what she's feeling, he or she is feeling. And I need to understand what is the need that's gone unmet with that part of me, so that I can tend to that part of myself. And if we look at, like, if you think of your inner children, your angry teenager might be in a fight response. The my personal example would be like my 8-year-old feels the most abandoned, and she has more of a freeze response. And so understanding these different parts of our younger self that are emotionally frozen in time, and understanding that each of those parts also can have a different state of the nervous system. And this is where I just geek out on all of applying polyvagal theory and how we understand the nervous system to work, because I had studied neuroscience in my doctorate program and I knew nothing about what to do with myself when I was triggered. But once I actually started to study like what we now know about the nervous system, when we go into upregulation or downregulation, like what do I do with myself? And really understanding it's not about fixing, it's not about just self-regulation all the time. It's not about trying to just calm ourselves down all the time, which is kind of a myth
Mhm.
of the wellness industry.
Yeah.
I say this all the time, like you can't self-regulate yourself out of a toxic dynamic. If you're in a triggering environment or relationship and all you're doing is this was me. I was doing my Kundalini and I was doing my meditation, yet I was in a trauma bonded, deeply codependent relationship that kept me in a low level of anxiety. And so that wasn't ever healing my nervous system. All I was doing was continually calming myself down from the triggering thing that I was in. And so nervous system work is very much about not just calming myself down, but how can I increase capacity in myself to tolerate, the ups and downs of life, to tolerate the stressors of life that are going to continue to come. Life is not going to stop lifing us, right? How can I build this resiliency and this capacity in my nervous system to be able to hold, a wide range of emotion, the full spectrum of, human emotion, all the way from negative to positive, that I can hold both from an equanimous place, right? From a place of not making myself wrong. Because if I make myself wrong for how I feel, I'm probably just repeating the modeling that I learned from my parents, right? And how I see this a lot when people go to reparent. They do it from like a frustrated, agitated, impatient place. And then when I ask them, how was your mom or dad whenever they parent you? Oh, they were frustrated with me a lot. They were annoyed and they were impatient with me. And it's like, okay, so look at how you're that's how you're parenting your inner child. And can we reach for this sort of evolved way of parenting ourselves that maybe we weren't shown, and nobody's a perfect parent. So this work, I feel like, takes so much compassion, for ourselves and for other people. We can only access that state of compassion from a regulated state, which is why, like, for me and my work, the nervous system and creating that baseline of physiological safety is so massive, because we have to have safety, in the body to do that deeper inner child work or trauma work that maybe in the past has overwhelmed us.
It's really about creating rapport with these different aspects of us, right? It's not judging them, but really actually listen to what it is that they have to say, because their role is really to protect us, right? They don't know any better. So when we can indeed go in with compassion and creating rapport with all of these different aspects that are still in a wounded state, whatever that looks like, that is the best way to really, again, going into this embodiment of all that we are, right, in this human experience. I really love that. I wonder, you were talking about, how every single emotion was connected to, again, the eros, right? The erotic response. Could you elaborate a little bit on that, please?
Yeah, sure. This is such fun stuff when you get into kind of intermediate advanced S factors, when they really dive into the emotional psychology of the erotic creatures. And so each erotic creature is connected to an emotion. And so it's the concept that no matter what emotions running through us, that through our felt sense and through our awareness of somatic sensation, physical sensation, we can stay oriented to something in the physical body that feels good and feels pleasurable, and at the same time that we're running whatever emotion it is. And so it's this like exercise of the brain and the body that's been so oriented to negativity, and to like almost getting wrapped up into that, whatever that negative emotion is, and kind of getting stuck there and not knowing how to get myself out of it, right? Instead, I'm going to fully accept that this is the emotion that I'm feeling. I'm not going to make myself wrong for it. I'm going to understand that it's a normal emotion of the human experience. I'm not going to try to fix it. I'm not even trying to fix it. I'm actually just trying to allow my body to somatically express into almost like complete what the nervous system's natural response would be. For example, anger. Most people swallow it down, right? Or project it. So instead, this is capacity building work too. I'm going to stay with the anger in my body. I'm not going to project it. I'm not actually even going to try to fix it. I'm also not going to make myself wrong for it, but I'm actually going to fully go into the pissed offness. I'm going to fully go into the rage. And maybe that looks like starting like this and like, I just want to pull my hair out. Maybe this is what the movement, starts with, and allowing yourself to fully somatically express what the internal emotional experience is. And I have to say over and over again, when we're reflected, because what happens in S Factor, there's, a wall of women like observing, as this woman does like her free dance. And it is the most beautiful thing. And over and over and over again, what I see in there and in my group programs is that we heal when we're witnessed and when we are reflected. And so much of the inner child needs acknowledgement for the story they've been holding, for the pain they've been holding for so long. And just something happens to the soul and to the psyche whenever we're witnessed and reflected. And I see it over and over again, particularly in S Factor. There's this erotic creature. She's known as the shy, reluctant enigma. Her emotion is shyness. And so it's actually the one that would rather not be watched. It's actually the one that would rather be in the corner. And this is where women will start. If that's the erotic creature they're feeling, the teacher will be like, okay, does your back want to be turned to us? Mm-hmm. Okay. Does your hoodie want to be over your head? Mm-hmm. Do you want sunglasses on? Mm-hmm. Okay. So she's going to start back turned, right, to the group. And she might not come out, she'll play her song, and she might not come out and actually face, the other women the entire song. But nine times out of 10, what happens is if you allow that part, the one that wants to collapse, the one that wants to hide, the one that wants to be small, physically go into that posture of being small and of hiding. It's like you give that part of yourself the floor. You allow her to be seen in that collapsed, in that smallness, in that hiding. And then what happens eventually, and this is really fun for me to watch all the time, is that on the other side, whenever that shyness, is played out somatically, so to speak, all kinds of different stuff can come out on the other side of that. It might be joyful playmate. It might be naughty provocateur, any end of the spectrum of our, erotic creatures that want to come out. But and this is why I see it as such good somatic therapy. It's like, how can we learn to not make ourselves wrong and learn to somatically express and give these younger parts of ourselves that really feel these things in the moment. And instead of overriding it and like trying to act like I want to be seen and trying to act like I want to be, have eyes on me, why don't I do the opposite? Why don't I actually go into the thing that I actually feel, become congruent with myself, and give that part of myself the floor, so to speak, so that she can play it out? Because there's something on the other side of that shyness. The shyness isn't like her natural state. Shyness is her protected state, right? And the shy, reluctant enigma is very, very connected to the inner child, which is why I'm bringing that particular erotic creature up.
Another question I have is, would you see babies before they get too influenced by obviously upbringing, society, et cetera, would you see them as organically and naturally making these movements?
Totally. That's a really interesting question. Yeah, because when we look at like all the childhood development and babies' natural states, right? I would say there's like rolling and like more spirally and like circles in the spine. I think it's not until we're instructed in exercise class or in yoga class that we really take on this like rigidity of like linear movement. And
we're told right and wrong, right? They don't know that it's wrong, that they have anger. So they're going to just express it however it comes through, right?
Totally. It's so healthy. Yeah. Watch a child. If we need to learn how to express ourselves more, it's like, well, what does a child do? Well, they want to have a tantrum. What does the parent do? Let them have the tantrum. They're going to play it out. They're going to discharge that energy. It's only bad whenever, I would say, not bad, but the opposite is like what I was told. Summer, go to your room and get happy with yourself. And I would be like, like, that's not helping. That's not helping me. It doesn't help me to go alone and to be alone in my room, and just fuels the rage, And so, yeah, I think it's connection. Yeah. And allowing it. You're right. Kids don't know that. Don't make themselves wrong for how they feel, right?
Until they learn it is. Yeah.
Are there any studies on how children develop their sympathetic nervous system? I mean, we know by anger and happiness and joy and expressing all those things. What if that's interrupted?
Yeah, this is all of the work around like developmental trauma, right? And yeah, there's lots of studies on how the nervous system is formed in utero and through our interactions. One of the main ones is kind of like the attachment style studies, right? Where they take a baby in the room with a very loving, present, caregiving adult and watch how they're responding and see how they're regulated, right? And then they ask the adult to start being kind of aloof and ignoring, and you watch what the baby does, right? And the baby starts to like, kind of protest behavior or reaching out. They start to reach out, right? So they did a lot of studies. This is kind of where attachment theory came from, and which is really weaved into a lot of somatic therapy, type of programs and nervous system programs, because attachment style, you can relate each attachment style to a state of the nervous system. But yeah, there's a lot of studies on that particular piece around, well, what happens when we're ignored, right? Or if the parent just gets up and walks out of the room and doesn't say anything and the baby's just there alone and kind of feeling abandoned, what happens, right? Does the baby will initially maybe cry, and then that's that sympathetic response, that fight response. And then the baby eventually, it's either when we don't feel like our needs are going to get met or we can't escape this, the system will go, that's when the system will go into a freeze. It feels overwhelmed, right? That I can't escape this, or my needs aren't going to get met. And then you might see the baby just kind of like crawl into a fetal position and just sort of go into a freeze, right?
Have you worked with children with your modality?
I don't specifically work with kids, no. I've seen someone as young as like 18. And I've had like a 21-year-old, this really beautiful 21-year-old from Berlin go through my 6-month Foundations of Healing program, which is really cool. She actually cleared OCD. She has a really crazy case of OCD, and she had a ton of just inner child work healing to do. And it ended up helping clear her OCD. But I think it's like how I get people most of all kind of when they've been through those developmental stages. Typically, I get people like 20 years or older. I work with a lot of parents, a lot of moms, and a lot of dads, and every single time they go deeper into their own, reparenting work and inner child work, it ripples into how they're parenting. And so I had an astrologer tell me once, because when I told him I'm not having any kids in this lifetime, and she looked at whatever house kids are in, it's like, yeah, you don't have any kids in there, but through your work, you teach people how to mother themselves, right? Like it comes out in this kind of like non-traditional way, and which really resonated with me.
It's so true.
Yes, and we're seeing more and more mental disorders as well as neurodivergence as a trauma response, right? Of course, there is environment and et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of indications that it's mainly trauma responses in different ways that obviously has to do with the nervous system as well.
The hypersensitivity, that comes from, you see a lot of people that even label themselves as highly sensitive. I'm a highly sensitive empath, right? And it is a gift, like in one sense, and it also comes from trauma, right? It comes from us being hypervigilant and hyper attuned to everybody else around us. And what I was going to share is that I work with a lot of people that are hypersensitive, and the protocol that I work with is called the Safe and Sound protocol. It's an acoustic intervention for the vagus nerve. It's not just about calming the system down. It's actually considered a neural exercise. So it increases, it puts a neural demand, a progressive neural demand on the system to increase capacity and increase resilience. And Dr. Stephen Porges, who's the neuroscientist that created polyvagal theory, and the Safe and Sound protocol is his protocol. He actually started with kids with auditory hypersensitivity, so a lot of autistic kids. And they started to see how effective that this protocol was for their auditory hypersensitivity and for getting them into a more regulated state. So then they created the programs for adults. And so I used to give it as an option for people, but now I make every client go through it because I've seen it now. Everyone that's going, like the somatic reparenting work, well, it works and it'll get you there. But this protocol, it's like when I found it, I was like, oh my God, like I've been looking for this my entire career, like something to fast track one's physiology when they've been dysregulated for typically decades, right? It creates a baseline of physiological safety so that then they can go into the deeper trauma work or inner child work without collapse, without overwhelm.
Yeah.
So you do group sessions?
Yeah, all my programs are, you can't replicate what can happen in a group. And all my group programs include one-on-one work, but there's something about being in a group, despite everybody's resistance. I don't say everybody, a lot of people have resistance to being in a group, myself included, especially if your default is freeze, or you want to withdraw and you want to disconnect and you'd rather not be seen. It's interesting because I find myself speaking to that a lot, because that's the resistance that, even thinking about joining a group program is going to hit, and it has everything to do with the state of the nervous system. And what's just so true is that all of our trauma was made in connection, and it needs to be healed in connection.
Yeah. I love that. Back to connection and intimacy.
Totally. It's like we have this very low capacity when we're traumatized. We have a very low capacity for connection and for intimacy. It's not safe. It hasn't been safe for us in the past. And so, all the inner child work and the nervous system work we do between like us and us. And then that next level is how do we begin to relate to people? How can I begin to authentically relate to people and practice giving myself opportunities, coming into opportunities that could potentially give me a new imprint of safety? Because I've had so many imprints in the past that connection's not safe, love isn't safe, vulnerability isn't safe, expressing myself authentically isn't safe. And so however many of those we've had, it's like we need double, of the new imprint. So that's keep bringing ourselves into connection. I feel like a lot of times I'm speaking to myself because I had so much resistance to connection. And I live in, if you guys could know where I live, this is like the most remote part of the most remote island, like in Kauai. And I needed that for some time. It's like I was so burnt out from doing a lot of manual therapy on people. I was so burnt out that I kind of needed to swing to isolation for, it was a couple years actually, when I first moved on the island about 9 years ago. And then I realized, oh, I should probably connect with like other women or something. So I started to drive an hour each way, twice a month to a women's circle. And every time I'd leave, I'd like, wow, I have more energy. Actually, I feel replenished, not drained. And I feel like a lot of people go through that where they're so exhausted and so depleted. Sometimes the story is by people deplete me. And so we have to swing to being like, maybe we've been the yes man or the yes woman for so long. We got to swing to the other side where we're just a no, and we have good boundaries about some things. And I find eventually you'll come to like a middle, but sometimes we need the extreme, the other extreme, just to be able to heal and bring balance.
So are you teaching other practitioners this method so that they can start integrated into their therapy or into their work with their clients?
Yeah, so that's what my 9-month somatic reparenting facilitator training program is. Yeah, practitioners, coaches, therapists, that are maybe missing the somatic piece, they're missing the nervous system piece. They want to be able to take people through effective inner child work and being able to do it through the body. And I find a lot of practitioners, they've had so much training and so much study, and they've done so much self-help work. And by the time I get a lot of people, they've hit a plateau. They've hit some sort of plateau with like their usual methods, or talk therapy. They've hit a plateau with their talk therapy. And there's been this expansion of consciousness over the past 5 years, let's say, right? Where I think people really get it. Like, people understand now. Trauma lives in my body. I can feel that it's not just in my head. I can feel it's in my nervous system, and I can feel that I need to address it from that place. But what now? Well, but how do I do that? And that's kind of typically where I get people.
So do you have like a schedule where people can sign up or, meet you in Hawaii, or do you go to them and do this training?
No, it's all online. It's all online, and it's 2 group calls a week. One's for the Safe and Sound Protocol, and one's called a somatic integration call. People can actually join anytime, and they're Tuesday and Wednesday calls. And what I'm doing now is integrating a retreat, which is called the Kauai Medicine Retreat, into that. So where we have an in-person component, and I'll be doing that a couple of times a year.
So that will be on your website or on your social media in some capacity.
Yeah, I can give you the somatic reparenting facilitator training link that we can link. But yeah, that's all there.
That's so wonderful what you're doing. To me, this is like what you were saying, the next level after you get it and you go, oh darn, it's in my body. EMDR has been a very effective thing, and I actually see this as another type of EMDR where you're re-experiencing things, that come to you when you're in that non-dualistic state and present. Then you start to actually see where these things are in your body. So I'm just completely blown away by what you put together here. I think it's really next step for very quantum for getting to the root of our psychological blocks.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I came to this conclusion a few years ago. It was like in the midst of learning S Factor, where I was like, oh, if inner child work is level 1, then reclaiming erotic innocence is level 2, right? Because I was noticing, this is something I wanted to speak to Eben about, the erotic piece that you started with, which is what I learned through that practice, and what I continue to learn is that erotic energy, that life force energy that runs through me, that is inevitably going to run more as we release more and more trauma and repressed emotion from the body, that it's my energy, that erotic energy is mine. Like, it actually doesn't, we're so programmed to think that person turns me on, that person turns me on, right? Mm-hmm. That it has nothing to do, that actually has everything to do with how connected am I to myself. And I continue to see like the sexiest thing, movement that a woman might be doing might be literally like barely rolling around on the ground for a full song and just breathing, but she's so connected to her emotion that it's it's enthralling, it's captivating, it's very intriguing to just, you're pulled in, to the emotion itself. And so I feel like that magnetism even that we speak of, that maybe some people might say is eroticism, that lady embodies eroticism or something. There's a magnetism to it, and it's because she's so connected to her emotion, right? And when people are connected to emotion, it kind of draws people in, like, well, what's she so happy about? What's she so sad about? Like, right? So it kind of draws people in. But I just want to speak to that erotic energy piece of it, that reclamation, right, of erotic innocence. I feel like is a big part of trauma healing.
And for me, I think it's our personal, and it's also a sacred energy, right? When we orgasm, it's actually one of those very unique moments where we have the both of the hemispheres cohere. That is that our connection to the divine and into the 0 point, if you will, through pleasure. Right. So symbolically, that's also significant in regards to the nervous system, because I think everything, when we orgasm, we can't hold a thought. There is no thought at that moment. It is just beingness.
Yeah. And in S Factor, we call it body drunk. We get body drunk.
I know you have to take off here. You got another appointment coming up here in a few minutes, but I just want to, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for joining us here today, and bringing this wonderful new technique to help people be free and be the self they've always been meant to be, instead of the ones that they've been burying. So I'm just really touched by your work and what you've brought together.
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate that.
We have deep gratitude and respect for this journey that you've taken, and how you're spreading it and helping other people embody themselves in this beautiful way, especially right now in the paradigm shift that we're in. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's a pleasure of mine to share this work. It's been so impactful for me that I have a little fire under my ass to keep spreading.
Well, I hope we can get back together and you can keep us updated on what's happening with this, and how you're seeing it exponentially grow in our culture, with this new paradigm. It's so important.
Yeah, and I'll seed this here while I have the opportunity, but I have this bigger vision of really taking, and this is for anybody listening that has a connection to this, if you feel called to tell me, I have this vision, it's come to me in meditation, where it's like I'm meant to take the somatic reparenting method and plug it in to some sort of online university or online school, or like a bigger coaching program, so that I'm training the people that see, the practitioners that see a lot of people, so that the ripple can be really big. So I'm seeding that here in case anyone's listening and you have a connection, to someone that's running an online academy or university. That's part of the vision, is to really plug that in so that it can educate, practitioners on the somatic piece and the reparenting piece and the nervous system work. That's, in my opinion, should be the overarching umbrella of anybody's work, to allow, especially if you're working with people, because if you're not regulated, or I should say when we are regulated, other people have a chance at attuning to that regulation and to that frequency, and in that they can open and feel safe with us and have a sense of trust with us. And so that's a big piece of and passion, I think, for teaching coaches and practitioners is that it's like 80% of the work is like, how can we strengthen and refine your nervous system so that the moment someone comes into your field, immediately, without your conscious awareness, their nervous system's attuning, to that safety in you. And so that's a big part of why I like teaching practitioners.
Fabulous.
That resonates. Beautiful.
Yeah. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Oceans of love.